So, you're a business owner dedicated to the significant and sustainable growth of both you and your business. Welcome to the Add a Zero podcast.
Hi, it's Jay Allen from the Add a Zero podcast, and this week I wanted to talk to you all around values. Now you might question, Jay, why do we need to know about values? Surely we're a small business, we all get on really well together, there isn't a problem there. Values is for bigger, more corporate businesses that have posters on walls in headquarters. Well, that might be what you were thinking, but what I wanted to share with you today is a story of a client I worked with about two and a half years ago now, and the impact not having a defined values had on their business. Gary had worked for the same company where he'd done his apprenticeship straight from school. And unfortunately, at 38 years old, the company ran into some financial difficulties, struggled to be able to get over them, and was in the process of being liquidated. Gary and his friends from work were all being laid off, and with no sight of an opportunity ahead of them, him and two others decided that they were going to set up and run their own business. It had been formed out of necessities to be able to find a salary, to be able to keep their families together. And three people bought some tools out of the company as it went into liquidation, set up in a small warehouse and a little lay-by in the back streets of the local town where they started. And some 10 years later, now employed 23 people. It was a wonderful success story that I'm sure will relate to you or people that you know within your community. It was one of those incidental overnight successes that had taken almost 40 years to be able to create. And Gary was a lovely chap. He worked with two great guys. And like I say, they'd grown this business out of nothing other than necessities to be able to keep themselves together and to be able to earn a living. And had subsequently gone on to be able to grow it to a 1.7 million pound business when I first met them. I was fortunate enough to have been invited to speak at a regional business networking event, and Gary was a member of their mastermind, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, you spoke really a lot around the 80% of businesses that are wrong about everything, and then you shared some data-driven statistics about why businesses get it wrong and how they hold themselves back from achieving everything that they set out to achieve. And some of the things that you said really, really resonated with me and my business right now. I wonder if we can have a conversation. And sure enough, we met a few days later. I had a conversation with him, and I was shocked, absolutely shocked, when he was telling me how much they were spending on external HR support. They were a business of 23 employees, or 3 owner managers and 20 staff. They operated out of one unit. They'd outgrown the original unit, but they'd simply moved into a larger workshop on the same business park, and they all worked the same hours. And yet the year to date, before I met him, I think they were the 9th or 10th year in business by this stage of their own business. And the year to date, they just spent £90,000 on HR consultations to be able to aid and support them within the business. They were in the process of determining as to whether they were going to take on an HR director to specifically look after 20 employees. And I said, that seems excessively costly compared to where I would have expected a business of this size to be. Is there a particular problem? Is there a high churn rate? Are you spending a lot on recruitment and retention? We could certainly work with that through our recruit, retain and reward scheme. What's the problem? He says, well, we have a lot of fights at work. And I was like, what? He said, yes, it's a regular occurrence that the lads get into fisticuffs and there'll be scraps in the car park most weeks. I was like, what on earth's going on? What had actually transpired is that the business was just outside Liverpool. It was on the outskirts of Liverpool. And whilst they'd recruited effectively to be able to bring people into the business with skills and experience, one of the things and the questions that they hadn't asked was, are you a Liverpool or an Everton supporter? And as it transpired, 11 of the staff were avid Liverpool fans. They had season tickets, they attended every match, both home and away, and 6 of the more recent employees were season tickets of Everton. And every time either Everton or Liverpool played, regardless of whether they won or they lost, the bickering and the banter, the challenges, some of the unprofessional remarks and, quite frankly, childish pranks that were being played on each other escalated to such an extent that there'd been physical fights. The police had been called to the premises 4 times in the last 12 months to be able to break people apart. And as a result, there was a continual requirement for HR to be involved and to deal with disciplinaries and pay issues and challenges with regards to what had been happening. And all of this could have been resolved if the business had had a value statement that had been embedded within the business. Let me help you understand. Values is not a poster on the headquarters wall. It's not a few words stuck somewhere of inspiration. Values is the heartbeat of a business. Values is how we do business. It defines not just who we are, but how we are. And once a value statement is embedded into a business, it becomes the bedrock to which we measure anything and everything that we do. So how do you go about doing it? Well, first of all, the biggest error I see with small businesses that we work with both across the UK and further afield in the US and across the United Emirates, one of the biggest errors I see is either businesses that don't have a value statement, and like I say, Gary's was a perfect example of that. Businesses that have defined their value statement by copying it from a big corporate. They found something online, they found a poster with some nice words on and say, oh yeah, that resonates with us, we'll have one of those. They've become our values. And it's become a tin pot exercise. They've simply bought a poster, stuck it on the wall and said, well, we've now got a value statement. Or maybe you've gone a little bit further. Maybe you've actually sat and defined as to what it is that is important to you as the business owner, and then come back into the business and introduced a set of values. Now, don't get me wrong, that's a better step in the right direction. But whilst a vision should come from the top down, a vision should come from the owner-manager and then be introduced to the business, values have to come from within the business. A values exercise done well determines who is within the business. Not just the shareholders or the owners or the managers or even the team leaders, but for every single stakeholder in the business should have a contribution towards being able to help define the way in which we operate as a business in order to be able to create collaboration and to be able to create that community of engagement and involvement so we can hold each other to account. In my book, Add a Zero, Establishing Basecamp, we've devoted chapter 2 entirely to talking about the values and the culture and how to define it and what you need to do in order to be able to create your own. If you haven't already got a copy, simply visit addazero.co.uk/shop, where you can access it as either a paperback or an ebook, or if you prefer an audio book. And chapter 2 is specifically all around values and how to define them in your business. I can't tell you the importance of taking the time to ensure that you've got a defined value statement that has been contributed to by everyone within the business at the point of creating values. Now, don't get me wrong, For every time that you recruit somebody or somebody leaves the business and replaced, you don't have to redefine your value statement. It's an exercise we perhaps do once, and we might have to revisit every 3, 4, 5 years as the business continues to grow and evolve. It might be that we have to go back and review the values to determine, are these still defining our core values right now? It's very rare that once you've got a good, effective value statement, that it ever has to be amended or changed or updated more than tweaked and amended, recalibrated to ensure that it's still who we are and how we want to be perceived. Once we've done it, it should be the bedrock on which everything is based. The other thing I wanted to quickly share is another brief story about how values are so effective within a business. Earlier last year, I took on a new role in a joint venture. I'd already been working with a gentleman for some time, and we defined that we wanted to be able to set up a business collectively and to be able to run it as a partnership. So I was coming into an existing business as a new co-owner along with a few members of staff. And thankfully, even though it was a small business of several 100,000 turnover as opposed to millions and millions, they'd already done the work and they'd got a relatively good and robust value statement. But within a few weeks, a few months maybe, of me being there, some of the staff had already determined, well, I'm going to try my luck here. I know that if I ask the original owner about X or Y or Z, he's likely to say no, or is likely to turn me back or push that back off the agenda. But this new chap, he looks young and enthusiastic. He looks like he perhaps doesn't know the history of either me or what I've been doing in the business, or that I've tried this before. He looks like he might be a soft touch. It might be that if I approach him and say I want to do X, Y, Z, or I want some time off, or I want this, that and the other, that I might be able to get more with him because he doesn't know me or the background or this and the other. So there was some questions being asked from some of the members of staff around whether they could change their times of work or defined hours or the job role and description. And there were a multitude of conversations that went on over a period of weeks, being tested and challenged to determine as to what type of a leader I was going to become. And one of these occasions, I had need of being able to have a telephone conversation with a remote member of staff to talk about performance, to talk about the set expectations of what their role determined, and to look at their performance targets over the last 2-3 months really, and how things, instead of progressing and improving, had slowly started to deteriorate. The amount of hours being done was the same, the productivity was becoming less and less, and mistakes were being made. So I'd booked an appointment. We were going to have a Zoom call. Like I say, this was a remote member of staff from geographically a significant distance away. So we're going to have a structured conversation around performance and to understand more about what was causing these issues, that perhaps I could help and support them to be able to become more productive again. And yet what I was challenged by is, instead of having this conversation, this structured, organised, HR-approved conversation, a documented conversation around performance, what I was met with is a whole host of demands from an employee. I expect you to, you've got to, I don't want to do this anymore. There was a lot of antagonism coming to me, as if I was the office junior and needed to kowtow to their expectations and demands. It was something quite untoward compared to what I was expecting from that particular meeting. And I allowed the member of staff to air their concerns. I listened intently. And then, rather than retaliating or allowing emotions to overcome, rather than being battled and then having a battle or being defensive about some of the accusations that had been made, I was simply able to ask a single question. Can you help me understand as to how any of the things that you've just said and the manner in which you've said them aligns with the company values? And the whole conversation changed. You see, when you have a defined value statement, something that is embedded within the business, we can use it as a measure. We can use it to set performance indicators and to determine as to how people are performing. Now, personally, I don't particularly like job descriptions beyond advertising for a role. I prefer to think that we can create a community of people that understand the benefit of working collectively for an agreed outcome. If I can set a goal for the business and inspire a team that says, once we've achieved X, this is what it will do for you as an individual. This is how you will be compensated. This is what life looks like for you once we've achieved the next milestone. Can we all agree that this is where we're going to head? And can we all be held to account both for our own actions and to support each other to achieve those actions collectively? And thankfully, in our business, in My True North, we operate to an attitudes and behaviours statement rather than a performance indicator and job description. That's not my job. Attitudes and behaviours. I want each and every member of staff to be able to demonstrate the right attitude and to show that attitude through the right behaviours. It's not about results driven, it's about the attitude towards showing up for work in order to be able to achieve the results that we set out to achieve. And that comes from being able to have a really good defined value statement to which all and every member of staff and every action and every job can then be measured. Can you help me, show me as to how what you've done today has been courageous? Our first value. How can you show me as to how you've had a courageous conversation? How you've been courageous in your actions? Can you show me as to how you've moved beyond the comfortability and boundaries that otherwise held you in place? I want to see you pushing limits. I want to know that you've been courageous. Can you help me and show me how you've achieved that? It's only when we have a clear, defined set of values that is understood within the business and then embedded within it that we can ensure that everyone at every point in time can be held to account for doing the right thing for the right reasons to get the right results. And that's the core of having a good value statement. Like I say, if you haven't already done so, we've dedicated an entire chapter to that in my book, Add a Zero, Establishing Basecamp. So if you haven't already got a copy, drop along to the website, www.addazero.co.uk/shop, look for Establishing Basecamp, and then determine as to whether you want either the paperback or the ebook, or preferably the audio book, or maybe all three. And read in chapter 2 all around how to set values, how to measure the values, how to define them, how to embed them, and to understand the impact of having that within the business. I'd love to be able to hear your thoughts and ideas about how you created values within your business, and how's that going for you? How is the KPIs and your performance indicators? How is your retention rate and your churn rate of staff? If any of that's been a problem, the chances are that it could be that we've got to go back and redefine the values within the business and to ensure as to how they're being measured and managed in order to be able to achieve the results that you've set out to achieve. Hope that's helped. I'd love to be able to hear from you and find out as to what you've taken from this episode. So feel free to get in touch by simply emailing podcast@mytruenorth.biz. I'll be back again next week, but until then, God bless, take care. I'll see you soon.
That's all for this episode. As always, we really thank you for listening and welcome your comments, thoughts, and suggestions. So please do drop us a line by emailing podcast@mytruenorth.biz. And don't forget, if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button on whichever platform you're listening to this through. And tell your colleagues and business network all about who we are. You've been listening to the Add a Zero podcast presented by Jay Allen. Brought to you in association with My True North, the UK's leading ethical coaching company.